So, the president's State of the Union address is right around the corner. It's that time of year when we typically hear about strength and optimism. But we wanted to dig into the data to see what the actual mood of the country is right now. And what we found? Well, it looks like a nation that's feeling pretty divided and, frankly, anxious about where things are headed. Let's just start with this one number because it really says a lot. According to a new poll from PBS News, NPR, and Marist, a full 6 in 10 Americans feel that the country is in a worse place today than it was just a year ago. I mean, think about that. That's a clear majority of people feeling like we're moving backward. And it's not just that one poll either. When you ask people directly, is the state of our union strong? The number of people saying yes actually dropped 4 points in just the last year. So you can see why this is setting the stage for a really, really high-stakes speech for the president. Okay, so what is going on behind these numbers? This isn't just about statistics, right? It's reflecting a real dissatisfaction out there. Let's try to unpack the key factors that seem to be driving this feeling all across the country. This quote from Dylan Kelly, a Democratic voter up in Minnesota, just brings it all to life. For him, the word is terrible. And notice his concern isn't just about policy. He's worried about our democracy itself. He says he feels like the country is, quote, teetering on the edge of losing it all. So what's really at the heart of this national anxiety? When you look at the sources, it's this potent mix of concerns. It's everything from very personal worries about money to these huge, fundamental questions about our national character and how power is being used. It really seems to boil down to 3 big areas: what people are feeling in their wallets, how they're seeing other people being treated, and whether they can trust the government's use of power. Pockets, people, and power. So first, let's talk about pockets. Now, you hear a lot of positive headlines about the economy, right? But a recent Quinnipiac poll shows this huge disconnect. 56%, a clear majority of voters, actually disapprove of how the president is handling the economy. But here's the thing. How you feel about the economy seems to depend almost entirely on your politics. You have supporters like Christopher Gunkel, a Republican from Virginia, who says he feels more comfortable with the president at the helm. And he's not an outlier. About 2/3 of Republicans feel pretty good about the economy. Now, contrast that with the view from Mark Mielbrock, an independent out in Oregon. His take is incredibly direct. Most people are struggling. It really highlights this massive gap between the economic headlines and what so many Americans are actually experiencing day to day. Okay, now let's shift to that second driver of anxiety, people. And there is probably no issue that's been more of a flashpoint than the administration's really aggressive stance on immigration. It's a policy that's had a dramatic and deeply personal impact all over the country. And this isn't just about abstract policies. We're talking about the real on-the-ground impact. Things like mass deportation drives, federal agents flooding into cities, and this kind of dragnet approach that's catching people who've lived here for years. It's led to some terrible outcomes, including family members of U.S. citizens being detained or tear-gassed, and even the killing of 2 American citizens by federal agents in Minneapolis. So when you hear about impacts like that, this poll from Reuters/Ipsos starts to make a lot of sense. A clear majority of Americans, 58%, believe that the administration's immigration agents have gone too far, and that's created a real vulnerability for the administration on this issue. And this brings us to the third and maybe the most fundamental anxiety of all, power. The concern seems to have shifted away from just disagreeing with specific policies to worrying about the health and integrity of American democracy itself. It's like the whole system is on trial. And this is a truly sobering number. 2/3. 2/3 of Americans now believe the system of checks and balances isn't working well. I mean, faith in this core pillar of American democracy has just cratered. That number has actually doubled since before the president was inaugurated. So what does this all mean? Well, legal experts are completely divided. On one hand, you have law professor Kimberly Wheeler, who argues that the basic pillars of constitutional democracy have been, in her words, demolished because the president knows there are no consequences coming from Congress or the courts. But then you have John Yoo, a former Justice Department official who sees it totally differently. He argues the president is just trying to restore the presidency to what he believes the founders originally wanted. This is the incredibly fractured reality that the president is about to address. So it raises a huge question. In a country this divided, with faith in the system this low, can a single speech actually do anything to change the narrative? Yeah, this State of the Union feels like it's much more than just a yearly tradition. It's a critical, high stakes moment for the president to try and hit the reset button on his second term and speak directly to a nation that is clearly wrestling with some very deep anxieties. So, what's on his to do list for this speech? Well, first, he needs to redefine his second term, which one analyst said has gotten off message. Second, he's got to push his policy agenda, things like lowering electricity costs and requiring voter ID. And third, and this is a big one, he needs to use what is probably his biggest audience of the year to try and win over some of those skeptical voters. But here's the bottom line. No matter how well the speech goes, no matter how much applause he gets, the real verdict on his performance isn't going to be decided in that room. It's coming later this year. This quote from John Yoo really frames it perfectly. He basically says that the true check on a president's power lies with us, the voters. The ultimate accountability? It's the ballot box in the November midterm elections. And you really can't overstate the stakes here. We're talking about who controls the Senate, who controls the House of Representatives. The results will literally determine what kind of constraints, if any, are placed on the White House and which direction this country heads in for the next 2 years. Which leaves us with this final critical question. With faith in our democratic system at such a low point, will the midterm elections serve as a kind of course correction for the nation, or will they end up being a confirmation of the president's polarizing path? That is the answer the entire